Hi and welcome to Drummers Review. I'm Nolly, and today we're going to be looking at a selection of Natal Cafe Racer snare drums. With us today we have 6 different snare drums. We've got 14-inch and 13-inch versions of 2 different metal models and one that's made out of wood. The wood-shelled snare drums are made with 6 plies of tulip wood, which is a timber that Natal are employing in their Cafe Racer shell pack. They claim that tulip wood has a slightly darker and shorter voice than most other timbers that get used in drum manufacture. These 2 drums have a 6.5-inch depth, where all of the other drums that we're reviewing today are 7 inches deep. The metal shell drums that we have are both made out of steel, with one of them having a double bead and a center section that's hammered, and the other having a completely hand-hammered shell. The street pricing for these drums seems to come in between £250 to £280, so let's take a deeper listen and come back for some more discussion afterwards. Our initial impression is that these drums look really nice, and in fact we feel like we'd probably have valued them at a higher price point than they actually are. The tulip wood model with its detailed inlay and the beaded metal shell both have distinct and cool looks to them, while for my personal taste I felt like the fully hammered model was perhaps a little bit busy on the eye. Picking them up, they're all fairly lightweight drums with the exception of the fully hammered model, which has got a bit of extra weight, I'm guessing just from the mass of having double the number of lugs. Speaking of which, the Sun logo branded turret lugs are very heavy duty, and I think they look really smart too, accompanying both the metal and wood shell drums equally well. As a side note, the tulip wood model is offered with an option of satin or gloss finish. Our 14-inch here today is satin, where the 13 is gloss. Moving on to the sound, these drums have a kind of bright and aggressive character to them. There's an impressive amount of articulation and response there, especially given the depth of the drums. The metal shell drums are surprisingly dry, especially given the fact that steel is reputed to have a very long overtone heavy sustain. I think this comes down to the effect of the hammering of the shells, as well as the use of a more controlled head in the Evans Power Center reverse dot that's fitted as standard on all of these drums. We were really quite surprised at just how similar these drums sounded to one another, especially given that there's a wood drum thrown in there with the two steel shells. With the 14 inches tuned low, the tulip wood snare really impressed us with a nice hefty whomp in the low end, as well as a generally dry and articulate voice. The fully hammered steel shell had a more brash character to it, with a more audible snare rasp, while the beaded shell model sat probably somewhere between that and the tulip wood, but again surprisingly similar to the tulip wood model. Cranked up high, we felt like the hammered steel drum started to fall behind a little bit with a slightly thinner sound that we didn't like as much. On the other end of things, we felt like the tulip wood really excelled and stood out as the leader of the pack. The 13-inch version of the hammered snare to us shone more than its 14-inch brother. It's got a killer pop to it, as well as more mid-range overtones that seem to work well in all the tuning ranges. The 13-inch tulip wood drum also impressed with a controlled and satisfying voice, where the beaded metal drum fell behind the others, especially in the high tuning where we felt like the overtones were a bit more present and harsh in general. Given that these drums have so many close similarities in their sound, we feel like potential buyers could almost make their choice out of which they'd like based on the aesthetics. We couldn't say that these are particularly classic sounding drums, but they're not modern either, and we feel like they fit a nice middle ground that would be great for gigging or recording musicians of all levels. Build quality wise, these drums are good, especially for the price point. Looking inside the tulip wood model, we did notice a few blemishes in the plies, but nothing that affects the performance at all. That said, unfortunately there is a bit of an issue with the angle of the tension rods on the metal drums. It feels like the shell is perhaps a slight bit oversized, which is causing the lugs to bend inwards towards the rim. That wouldn't be a huge problem in and of itself, but particularly on the fully hammered shell, what this means is it can be quite difficult to get a tuning key onto the tension rod, especially when it's tuned low. The beaded shell drum does suffer from the same problem, but since it's only got a single set of turret lugs and longer tension rods, they're not quite as angled by the time they reach the rim, which means that it doesn't seem to present itself as a problem to the tuning key. With that said, these drums do feel very solid, and the tuning action in general feels great on them too. One of the really cool features with these drums is the use of Natal's true tone tension rods, which are plastic dipped on the end, meaning that they don't unscrew as easily, so the drums seem to stay in tune noticeably better, especially once the heads are settled and in tune. I also think it's really neat that these drums come with full-fledged Evans heads, and slightly controlled ones at that, because I really do think that that gives these drums an edge sonically over similarly priced drums on the market. Another cool touch is the multi-position strainer, which allows you to get to a lower tension setting if you push it past the notch at the vertical position. While this is really cool, it does have to be noted that it's quite easy on the fly to push it too far and end up with too buzzy a snare sound. So it might take a little bit of getting used to when you first sit down to play these drums. We certainly found ourselves fumbling on more than one occasion. It seems fair at this point to say that these are probably some of the best value for money snare drums that we've reviewed. That combination of sound and great tunability, as well as the fact they stay in tune so well, makes them seem a bit of a bargain at the price point. Sure, there are a couple of minor niggles here, but there's nothing that can't be worked around, and there's no reason why these drums shouldn't deliver many years of great service. We really hope you've enjoyed this video, but we'd love to know your thoughts, so please leave us a comment. Don't forget to subscribe for more content too, and I'll see you next time at Drummers Review.